I'm a registered nurse. I am the Community Health and Wellness Coordinator for the Division of Developmental Disabilities. I am on the State Quality Program team. Today, I have Adil Khan assisting me with this presentation, and Adil is a research analyst. Also, as a panelist, I have Leslie DeGroat, and she is the Clinical Coordinator for the division. Next slide, please. Today's presentation will be an overview to highlight the division's process enhancements that will be effective on 6/15 of 2023 for DMH-DD contracted residential service provider notification to the division when there is a residential oversight RN vacancy or new hire. Notification process enhancements are intended to streamline communication to the division when there is a residential oversight RN vacancy, enhance the residential oversight RN orientation process, and support waiver residential service participant health and welfare. Adil will be providing a demonstration on the provider portal notification system powered by REDCap that is tied to the RN vacancy and hire notification. This presentation will be recorded, as Kat said, and posted to the DMH webpage. Next slide. Before we dive into the provider portal notification system powered by REDCap, it is important to note that the residential RN oversight service and training requirements have not changed. Likewise, the expectation for notifying the regional office when there is a residential RN oversight vacancy has not changed. Updates to the vacancy notification process through the provider portal powered by REDCap will support ongoing analysis of the residential RN workforce, as well as a notification when a provider is not able to complete the required health risk screens during the residential RN vacancy. The information provided in REDCap will also serve to meet the reporting requirements per Section 3.7.7 of the Purchase of Services contract pertaining to the residential RN vacancy. Likewise, the development of the residential RN hire notification feature in REDCap will streamline the division's statewide process to implement training when a residential service provider notifies the division that they have a new residential RN. The new hire feature not only streamlines the residential RN orientation process, but also serves to close the loop on any reported vacancy. Enhancements to the division's statewide residential RN orientation include streamlined access and inclusion of an online knowledge check. Later in this presentation, I will discuss the orientation process in more detail. Next slide. In an effort to streamline and provide consistency across the state, a notification form was developed in the provider portal for when a residential oversight RN vacancy occurs. The REDCap vacancy notification is accessed through the provider portal. The link on this slide will allow the agency provider to access the DMH-DD webpage titled Information for Service Providers. Once on the Information for Service Providers page, to access the REDCap Residential Oversight RN Vacancy and Hire Reporting form, you will need to select the orange ribbon titled Provider Portal. To bring up the selection for the Residential RN Oversight Vacancy Hire Reporting form, please note that the REDCap notification form will not actually be available until June 15th of 2023, which happens to be tomorrow. Next slide. Notification is a fillable form. The system does allow the provider to identify if a residential oversight RN service needs can be met. However, if service needs cannot be met, for example, by utilization of another agency nurse or temporary nursing service agency, the system allows the provider to upload the interim plan for the RN oversight coverage. The system also allows the provider the ability to identify coverage needs for completion of any scheduled health risk screenings. During the vacancy, when an agency is not able to conduct the health risk screening tool process, for example, by utilizing another residential agency oversight RN, The division or its designee will complete the health risk screening tool and applicable health risk support plans scheduled during the vacancy, during the RN vacancy. The provider will be responsible for the monthly residential RN oversight duties during the vacancy per the purchase of service contract. The only exception will be the HRS residential RN rate or role. Next slide. Upon completion of the residential RN vacancy form, an automated notification will be sent to the designated Regional Office Quality Program lead. The Regional Office Quality Program lead will assign a designated Regional Office Quality Program RN to review the information submitted through the system to assure that the interim plan addresses the service requirements of the monthly residential RN oversight. Any identified health and safety concerns or lack of interim plan will then be communicated to the designated regional office director. If the provider communicates that the identified nursing service needs of the individuals are being met, the designated regional office quality program RN will close the review by providing a date and a signature in the provider notification REDCap system. Next. As mentioned previously, the REDCap RN vacancy form allows the provider to identify cover needs for completion of any scheduled health risk screenings during the vacancy. Upon identification, an automated notification will be sent to the division's health and wellness coordinator. The health and wellness coordinator will work with the division or its designees to complete the the health risk screening tool. That's what we shorten it down to the HRST, the health risk screening tool and applicable health risk support plans scheduled during the oversight RN vacancy. Just as a reminder, the provider will still be responsible for monthly residential RN oversight duties during the vacancy for the purchase of services contract. Again, the only exception will be the HRS residential RN rate or role. So now we are going to, next slide, please, Kat. Okay. So now we are going to switch gears and discuss the residential oversight RN new hire provider portal notification feature powered by REDCap. The residential RN oversight new hire notification form is accessed the same way in the provider portal as the residential RN vacancy form. This can be utilized by the provider to complete for augmented staff as well, meaning if the provider is hiring a new RN due to growth but doesn't relate to a vacancy. This form also serves to close the loop on a reported vacancy when a vacancy has been filled. When this form is completed, it will streamline communication for the residential RN oversight orientation requirement. This survey form will be a fillable form. The form will allow for notification of hire date and residential RN new hire contact information. The contact information of the new hire is important because the system will send an automated email to the new residential RN communicating orientation requirements. Again, the orientation requirement and orientation completion within 90 days of hire has not changed, just access, which we will describe later in this presentation. Next. Provider completion of the residential RN hire form, an automated notification will go to the designated quality program lead. The quality program lead will then assign a regional office quality program RN to serve as a regional office contact for the new residential RN hire to assist with any questions about the residential oversight RN service. Again, the orientation requirement and orientation completion within 90 days of hire has not changed. As mentioned earlier, our next step is to provide a demonstration on how to complete the residential RN vacancy and RN hire form in the provider portal. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Adil Khan. Adil is a research analyst with the division. Adil also developed the REDCap survey form for the RN vacancy hire notification process. Adil has agreed to assist with today's presentation and will be providing the demonstration. So Adil, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tricia. Like Tricia said, I'm Adil Khan, research analyst. I'll be demonstrating how providers will report an RN vacancy or hire using a survey powered by RedCap. Really quickly share my screen over here. And this is the provider portal that providers will be accessing using our dmh.mo.gov website. And they will come over here, click the residential oversight RN vacancy hire reporting. Now, currently it's not available. It will become effective, like Tricia said, 6/15/23, which is tomorrow. While clicking this, providers should be directed to this survey over here that I have in front of me. The first thing they essentially need to do is select a regional office. Now, there probably might be more than one regional office, and that's fine. So the providers can go ahead and essentially select as many regional offices uh, as required. Going down, they will expand the drop-down menu and select the name of the agency. If for any particular reason they do not find that their agency is listed over here in the drop-down, they will click other over here, which will cascade down another box over here, which will ask them to specify the name of their agency. Upon filling that information out, if I were to scroll down over here, the agency will then provide contact information for the person contact for that provider agency, their name, their phone number, and their email address. Now, this email address is important because in the event that they're not able to um, submit an interim plan, which I'll talk about later, then they will receive a trigger notification on the email address provided over here. Now, for this survey, there are three options. Like Tricia mentioned, one is for vacancy, reporting against a hire, and augmented staff, which is primarily a hire, but it is just that there isn't a vacancy uh, due to which the new hire is coming into effect. So if you were to click on vacancy, the vacancy radio button, this would cascade down into a couple of other fields. The first one being the number of individuals impacted by the residential RN vacancy. We'll go to enter a number over here, the date of the RN vacancy, and the expected or projected time that this position will be vacant, the number of months. The other thing is the attestation or requirements for resources for the purpose of coverage during the interim. It's if this is a yes, then no further fields will pop down. But if this is a no, then this will cascade down into a couple of other questions asking the provider whether they have an interim plan. Or describing how RN oversight requirements are to be met. If they have an interim plan, they'll go ahead and choose the first radio button, which will then expand into another couple of options. The first one being that they will be required to upload this interim plan, and they will also additionally have to answer whether or not they've uploaded this interim plan. As stated earlier, if they've indicated that they cannot, that they cannot attest that requirements pertaining to RN oversight can be met, and they choose that they have an interim plan, but they do not submit the interim plan, which would essentially mean that they click a no over here, then they would be triggered an email in the email provided over here requesting them to send the interim plan to the appropriate QAS lead for a particular regional office. And the last question over here for reporting a vacancy would be, does the agency have a trained nurse ready to continue the process during the RN vacancy? And the selection is the last selection. Going back really quickly, the second option, I believe, was if the provider wanted to report a hire, they click the second radio button over here, and you have a different set of fields over here. The first one being the hire date, the name, and RN's email. Once again, as stated earlier by Tricia, this is very important because the email provided over here by the provider for the new RN hire will receive a trigger notification detailing the steps for the orientation and the RN phone number. Going back, this is the third option, the augmented staff. It's identical to the hire option. It asks for the hire date, first, last name, email, and phone. Once again, this email will have the same function as the one stated earlier for reporting hire. And so this is, in a nutshell, the residential service provider oversight RN vacancy hire reporting. One thing that I would like to mention over here that it's possible if provider is reporting a vacancy and they say they're not able to attest to these requirements for coverage in the interim, and they say that they have an interim plan, they fail to upload the interim plan over here because it's a must or a required field over here, and they select a no over here, and they filled out everything else except for uploading the interim plan, and they submit, they will not be allowed to submit, although at the back end, this form will be saved, thus triggering a notification to the provider telling them that they have to submit the interim plan to the appropriate QAS lead. And I believe this ends our demonstration of the REDCap survey. Over to you, Tricia.
You, Adil, for providing that demonstration. Also on Adil's demonstration, if the provider in the REDCap system identifies that they cannot meet the HRS, they cannot complete any of the HRS screenings, which is an option that you have to select from, that will send an automated email to the health and wellness coordinator, which at this time happens to be me. And then I'll be reaching out to the provider to provide assistance in meeting those needs to get those health risk screening tools and HRSPs completed. Okay, so let's see, Kat, if you could move on to the next slide. Yep. Okay. So currently, right now we're going to go into the RN orientation, discuss some of the enhancements to the residential RN oversight orientation process. Currently, the monthly RN oversight training is located in the MODD Relias training platform, and the program manual is located in the HRS inelectability system. So the residential RN needed to access two different platforms for two different required training components. One of the enhancements to the orientation process was to move the required training components to one location, which will be the MODD HRS inelectability system. So now the residential RN will only have to access one system to complete their orientation process. The designated agency HRS gatekeeper will create an account in the HRS system for the residential RN. The residential RN will receive an email notification from inelectabilities with instructions on how to set up their HRS account and how to access the system. Upon gaining access to the HRS system, the residential RN will be assigned trainings that are aligned to their role as the residential oversight RN. Next. Okay, so when the new RN hire accesses the system for the first time, a pop-up alert will alert them that they have trainings in their training library to complete. The new hire RN will click OK on the pop-up, and the system will automatically take the user to the training library. The new hire RN will need to complete the orientation training before proceeding with any other trainings or assignments in the HRS system. This slide shows a depiction of what the user will see once logged into the system. The user will select the training to open the training modules that will need to be completed. Next. Okay, so this slide shows what the training course and modules look like once the user has selected the residential RN oversight orientation and attestation training course. Again, the new hire will need to complete each training module to receive their certificate of completion. Each of the training modules are sequential and will need to be completed in the order listed. The system will not allow the user to complete in any other order. Next. Okay, other enhancements to the residential RN orientation are the process training video has been revised to align with the implementation of the MODD health risk screening process and the role of the residential oversight RN as the HRS clinical rater. The HRS clinical rater required trainings will be assigned once the residential oversight RN orientation course has been completed in the system for any new residential RN hire. Another enhancement was the development of an online knowledge-based questionnaire or check. The questionnaire is designed to provide 20 questions for the RN to respond to as a review of the orientation training. The questionnaire process provides the opportunity for the residential RN to take the knowledge check as many times as needed to answer all of the questions correctly. The online knowledge check has a feature that provides a rationale of where the correct information can be located in the Residential RN Oversight Program Manual when an incorrect response is selected. An additional process enhancement is the feature to download and print a copy of the Certificate of Completion in the MODD HRS Ineluctability System. The certificate is accessible to the residential RN as long as the residential RN has assigned access to the system. Upon completion of the orientation process in the system, the residential oversight RN will also receive an email connecting them to their local regional office quality program RN contact for any additional future questions regarding the residential RN oversight requirements. So to recap, the orientation requirement has not changed. The components of the orientation process are the same, but have been enhanced as highlighted during this webinar. Any trainings related to the HRS clinical rater component of the monthly residential oversight RN oversight service are separate required trainings. The required trainings to become an HRS clinical rater will be assigned in the HRS training library for the residential Oversight RN completion once the orientation component is completed. Next. So this concludes our presentation. I want to thank Adil for joining and providing the demonstration for the RegCap RN vacancy and hire notification process. I also want to thank Kat Craig for helping put on this webinar. And I also want to thank each of you for taking the time to join today. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. And the recorded webinar, PowerPoint, and Q&A from the chat questions will be accessible on the DMHDD webinar page. And that link to that webinar page is on this slide. And if you have any additional questions regarding the RegCap RN vacancy and hire notification or the RN orientation process enhancements, please reach out to the MODD ClinOp team mailbox. And that mailbox is also listed on this slide. And so thank you and have a wonderful day. And again, thanks for joining. And Kat, I don't